You're watching Voiceover, How Did You Do It? At voiceoverpodcast.com, where we talk to seasoned, successful voice actors to find out how they did it. I'm your host, Ian Kleinfeld, and you can find me at voicebyian.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at voicebyian. Hi, Khristine. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. It's just a dreary, rainy day here in North Carolina. How about
Uh,
you?
well, it's a little cloudy, a little gray. We're expecting some snow and ice and fun things like that. So, but otherwise, I have a sunny disposition, so that's helping.
Well, I have a cloudy disposition.
Oh, well, then together we're a perfect day.
There you go. Yes. All we need now is someone with a breezy disposition.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's talk your start. Do you have a
Yeah,
website?
I do. I do. If you go to vamaudio.com, and Vam is spelled HVAM. So vamaudio.com, you can find about me and all the things I'm doing and up to. And
Well, what are you doing and what are you up to?
what am I doing and I'm up to? I do all sorts of things. So predominantly, I am an audiobook narrator, producer, director, and coach. So that's my main gig. And then off, on the side, I do commercial VO, animation, ADR, and that sort of thing.
Just a few things.
Just a few things,
And how
but I've
many
been doing this a
audiobooks?
while.
I think I read how many audiobooks you did, but I want you to tell me so I don't get it wrong.
I have done almost 400. I think somewhere between 375 and 390, somewhere around there. I know a lot of people keep track and I'm supposed to do that, but I don't. I'm a terrible person because there's books
Wow.
that I produce and there's books that I direct and there's books that I'm narrating. So, um, yeah, there's a mix in there.
So you've been working on this since you were 2 years old.
Thank you. That's a very nice thing to say. So I think I started this voiceover journey. Um, oh boy, that's something to think about. I don't know. I recorded my first audiobook in 2009 or
Okay.
2008. But prior to that, I was doing dubbing work and animation and video game and things like that.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Well, what were you doing before you were doing voiceovers?
Before voiceover, I was producing documentaries and I was producing at a local radio station.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, always in the art of storytelling.
Nice. What sort of
Yeah.
documentaries?
We were doing documentary. Do you remember Court TV back
I
when
do.
cable was a thing?
Yeah.
So we were recording. We were producing documentaries for HBO, Court TV, and Wham. So a lot of things were. uh, I one of the big pieces that we did for Court TV was about prisons, and so I remember spending a summer at Rikers Island where we would go to
Wow.
Rikers and film. Um, yeah, because we were doing a documentary about Rikers, and then we went over to the Tombs in Manhattan,
Uh-huh.
and then we were at a women's prison. So
Wow.
we did quite a bit in that space. It was a lot of fun. I mean, storytelling in all of its forms, whether it's through voice on stage and film and TV or documentary. I mean, that's my jam. That's what I love to do. So
Nice.
yeah.
And so how did you transition from that into voiceover?
So prior to getting into documentary and television and things like that, I had gone to school for acting. That was what I really wanted to do, was to
Mhm.
become an actor and go to LA and be famous. But I was chicken, so I didn't do that. And so after I think 2 years studying theater, I switched over to a broadcasting degree. And I was like, I think TV's a safer bet. And I was, real nervous to take the plunge and try to do this performer thing full time. It just scared the bejesus out of a younger version of myself. And
Mhm.
so I didn't pursue it. And so I pursued television and radio. And while I was working in radio, I was asked to do commercial spots just for the radio station. And I was like, I'm good at this. I think
Mhm.
I think this could be a thing. And I don't know if you know anything about radio, but it pays poop.
Mhm.
And I thought, I could bartend and make more money and pursue this voiceover thing. And I was finally old enough. I was just about 30 years old at that point. And I was like,
Mhm.
I finally had the confidence to kind of just take a chance on myself and say, you know what, I can do whatever I want to do. and I'm not going to be scared anymore. And so I got a full-time bartending job, and I just started pounding the pavement. Having a TV and radio background, I was able to build a studio in my closet.
Mm-hmm.
I joined every pay-to-play site that there was, and I started auditioning, and I answered an ad on Craigslist, and I ended up doing this great dubbing work, um, here in New Jersey. And I met these two wonderful directors while I was doing that. And as you know, with the voiceover business, a lot of it is who you know, and in addition to your talent and your work ethic. And those two directors moved on from that dubbing gig. One went over to Pokemon and took
Mm-hmm.
me with him, and I started working on Pokemon. And
Nice.
then the other went over to Audible. I think you all know what Audible is these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I auditioned for Audible, and then the rest is history. I mean, that's when my career really just exploded. Audible was so good to me. And I think my first year I did 2 books, and my
Mm-hmm.
second year I did 50. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I can't, it was right place, right time, right industry, right fit for me. It all just kind of fell into place. It was a true gift, really a gift.
Mm-hmm. And were you doing the animation and games at that point too,
Yep.
or a
Yeah.
little bit of everything?
Yeah, there was a year where I was working almost 7 days a week, where I
Uh-huh.
was, with the studios in Newark doing audiobooks Monday through Friday. And then Saturdays I would drive down to South Jersey to do dubbing. And then, a few days a week I would go into Manhattan to record Pokemon. And I was burning out fast. And
Mm-hmm.
so little by little, I had to make a decision, because at that point, my husband and we had gotten married and we wanted to have a family. And I kind of had to prioritize my career. And at
Mm-hmm.
that point, I was more successful in audiobooks than any other voiceover endeavor that I was doing at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I was earning better. And so I just sort of little by little whittled down what I was doing, and audiobooks became my main focus.
Nice. And you were the first audiobook um, specialist we've had on the show.
Oh,
So
I'm
yeah,
honored. I'm
yeah,
honored. There's lots of us, but I'm glad to be one of them.
nice. And so you've been doing that since 2009. And how many of those 400 have you been narrated on? Have you narrated on, and how many have you produced?
Um,
Roughly, ballpark.
so wow. So I want to say, of let's just say 375
Oh my
have
God.
have been narrated by me. And then most of the time, um, when I talk about producing, I do produce for independent authors, and I'll use talent outside of myself, but I'll also cast myself. So independent authors may come to me, and they're interested in having me record their audiobook, but they're not going through a traditional publisher. So then
Mhm.
I become the producer. So I have produced, God, I don't know, dozens of things like that, plus producing the very first 2 audiobook musicals that were
Oh,
ever done.
uh-huh,
My creative team and myself came up with these wonderful children's musicals. One is called Spin, the
uh-huh.
Rumpelstiltskin musical. The other is Puss in Boots. If you've got kids, definitely take a listen. They're kind of amazing.
Okay.
So I was co-creator, producer, director on those. And then I also direct audiobooks for several publishers in New York when I'm not actually narrating.
Oh, that's amazing. That is a lot of narrating audiobooks.
Yeah, it's
And
a
me,
lot.
I'm like, I don't even want to narrate one. I'm like, I look at that and I go, oh my God, I don't
It
want
c
to do that.
it can be, you're not the only person that says this, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of people in other forms of voiceover look at audiobooks, either as something they would absolutely hate to do, or it looks like it's too much work or whatever. But to me, when I remember being young, I don't know if the people viewing or listening will remember being as young as 4th grade, but I got to play Peter Pan in the 4th grade play, and everybody makes fun of me because I was mouthing the lines of every single actor on stage.
Uh-huh.
So, from the time I was little, I wanted to play everybody. And so audiobooks gives me this opportunity not just to play the main character or the fun cartoony side character or the ancillary somebody character, but I get to be everybody.
Oh,
And
fun.
for me, that's an amazing opportunity to stretch those muscles. So I can be some crazy gremlin, mysterious, dark, eerie guy. And I can be like a 15-year-old girl. So I can do all the things. I can play an old woman. I can play an old man. I can I can do all sorts of things. And that to me is where all the fun is. And I get to do that
Oh,
in one project. I don't have to have 25 different projects to accomplish that. I have one and I can do all those different things. I mean, there have been books that I've done that have had over 100 different characters to play. So to me,
wow.
that's super fun.
Now,
Yeah.
how often is it that people want just the characters narrated versus wanting the characters, say, inhabited, if that makes sense?
I think I say this in my coaching a lot, but there's a seat for every butt, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So there are some genres of audiobook where big characters are welcome, and there are some genres of audiobook where they are not. And there are some listeners that really love those characters being inhabited, and there are some listeners that really want the narrator to get out of the way. And as a coach and as a performer, I just do what feels right to me, what the author has put down on the page. And I try to stay true to the authenticity of the author and the author's intention. And I feel like if I'm doing that, then I'm doing my job.
Nice.
Sometimes that's big, bold characters, and sometimes that's a lot of subtlety. So I let the author dictate how that's
Mhm.
going to go.
And do you usually talk with the author at length about this sort of stuff, or?
As often as I can. As
Uh-huh.
often as I can, I like to sit down with the author before I get in the booth and really kind of get a sense of, um I mean, I can glean a lot just from the manuscript, but I really
Mhm.
like to talk to the author about their work, why they wrote it, how they see these characters. Are there any anchors that I can use, famous actors or
Mhm.
characters that they've thought of while they were writing these characters that I can help envision my character through. So I use the author quite a bit. I call them the first director,
Mhm.
right? So in any audiobook, a lot, and nowadays more so, there's just the narrator in the booth alone, and you're self-directing. And
Mhm.
so as a coach, I tell people you've got two directors in the booth. You've got the author and you've got yourself. And if you're doing your job and listening to the author's intention, it'll all make sense. So I take the author's lead on that.
Mhm.
And so talking to them can really help the prep process, the preparation process.
Now, what are some secrets about doing audiobooks that people who don't do audiobooks might not know?
You know, the thing I think I come across the most um, is that people think recording audiobooks is somehow different than any other kind of acting. But it's acting. If you are an actor, if you are a voice actor, you are an actor. You know how to approach character, you know how to approach story. And sometimes there's this interesting disconnect around audiobooks, like it's somehow different and should be
Mhm.
approached differently, but it's not. It's the stage is different, but the process is the same.
Nice. What about the kind of also the process of acting is the same, but what about the process of doing the project?
Um, I mean, yes, there are going to be differences. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mhm.
So, um, I think stamina is definitely something to consider. Vocal choices are always something to consider because you're not sustaining it for a 30-second spot or, a few sessions in animation, but you're sustaining that voice for hours. I mean, I record typically 6 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
Um, but what's different? I don't know. The approach is different, right? The storytelling is different.
Mhm.
Um, but when you have a piece of commercial copy, let's just use commercial copy as an example, you still have a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
So the process is longer, and there are more characters to play. There's more to learn about each of these individual characters, but the approach is the same. There's a setup, there's a sell, and there's a conclusion.
Mhm.
And it's really no different. It's just a lot longer.
Now, when I saw your bid in the teach-a-thon, your spot, your whatever, I don't know, your class, your course,
My 20-minute
your
long-winded, far too fast-paced speech, yeah.
yeah. So you talked about having you go through and you write down all the
Mm,
characters and you write
mhm,
down who they are and you have a grid system that you put in place,
Yes.
their
That's the
name and
that's the prep process.
yeah.
So the same way that you would approach commercial copy, you would go through the copy, you would read it, you would decide who this person is, who you're talking to, what the tone is. It's all the same. But the process for prepping an audiobook, and in the teach-a-thon, I went through it in length, is you're really just going to find out who all the players are. What is this story about? What's the main voice? What's the POV, right? Is it first person, second person, third person limited, and what
Mhm.
that means.
I didn't
And
even know
then,
what that means.
well, first person is I did this,
Well, that I
I did
know.
that. Third person is she did this, she did this, she did that. And third person limited is third person, but it's very obviously through the lens of an individual.
Okay.
Um, and then second person is present tense. I think I might be lying, but I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to figure that out. And then I'm going to go through each character and figure out who these characters are. How old are they? Where were they born? Do they have an accent? Do they have any vocal qualities that the author has described? What does the author say about this character, either in description or how other characters behave around them? Who do I anchor this character in? Who do they
Mhm.
remind me of? Does this
Mhm.
character remind me of my mom?
Mhm.
Fantastic. I'll just put her right in my head. How do they relate to the other characters? Is this the main character's mother, father, boyfriend, love interest? What's the deal? Pronunciations. I have to know how to say all the things that are in there. Authors love, especially in fantasy and sci-fi, a lot of world building. So they're recreating words. And so I need to know how to pronounce everything. So I'm going to have a pronunciation list. And then I love the third sheet of my prep, which is inspiration, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not a huge sci-fi fan and you haven't watched years of sci-fi throughout your life, but you get cast in a sci-fi book, you need inspiration. You need to go watch and consume some of that material to get you kind of in the spirit and the feel of it so that you know what's expected in that genre and how you're going to add yourself to it.
Mhm.
So that's a very, very shortened version of the prep process, but you need to understand all of those things in order to authentically and genuinely present that story. It's exactly the same as you would for a 30-second script, except there's more information.
Right. And in terms of how do you deal with the fact that it pays a lot less for a whole lot of work, or are you at the level where it pays an equivalent amount? Or because to me it looks like it's a lot of work for not that much pay, and maybe I misunderstand it, but
I think that's an interesting question
yeah.
because, um, well, I'll put it in terms of myself because I can't talk for anybody else, right?
Yeah.
I know what I was earning before audiobooks, and
Yeah.
I had to bartend to make ends meet.
Okay.
I needed another gig because I wasn't working enough um, in in commercial or in animation to make a living. And then audiobooks happened, and I didn't have to bartend anymore.
Okay.
So for me, I mean, listen, the voiceover community is vast, and when I got in, um, 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever it was, things were a little different.
Right.
So, because I am a union performer, it limits what I am able to do, and
Ah, okay.
commercially,
Uh-huh.
it's hard to make a living, with union commercial work or union animation work in New York. At least it is for me.
Uh-huh.
And, with audiobooks, I make a very good living.
Nice. How many do you do a week? One?
It well, during COVID, no, because
500 books a week.
so, when I didn't have a family to take care of and I
Yeah.
wasn't producing and directing and coaching and all of that, I was probably doing a book a week.
Uh,
But now I try to limit it to about 2 books a month.
okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And what do you feel like you owe your success in this genre to?
Oh, so many people. So many people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do I owe my success to? I think I owe if I'm gonna pat myself on the back, I think a whole lot of grit,
Hmm.
just a willingness to always learn, a willingness to always seek advice and be willing to take criticism as it is given. Um, a thick skin is always good. I think always being prepared. doing my homework, showing up on time, being someone producers and directors want to work with
Hmm.
helped me be successful. I might not have always been the most talented woman in the room, but I was the easiest to work with.
Hmm.
And so early on, that served me very well. Um, and then the people that I met along the way, I owe a lot to. Mike Charzik over at Audible gave me my first audition over there. And then after things started going really well for them, helped introduce me to the other publishers here in New York. Um, the directors that I worked with, when I was doing dubbing, and they introduced me to people. And then as I started working with different publishers, they would introduce me to other producers and other publishers. And so relationship building. And I think this is the same in all forms of voiceover. Relationship building becomes incredibly important. And not just the relationship building of I'm pretending uh, to be your friend, I'm pretending to care about what you're saying because I want to work, but a genuine connection,
Hmm.
has certainly helped my career.
Nice.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to people just starting out?
In audiobooks or voiceover in general?
A little bit of both.
Um, I think in most forms of voiceover, I don't want to give anybody advice because I didn't have an incredibly successful career there. I mean, I still work in those areas,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't say um, I'm in a position to give advice on how best to break in. But in audiobooks, I can tell you there are plenty of ways to get started. ACX is owned by Audible, Audiobook Creation Exchange. They really allow beginners to get their feet wet, where you're dealing with independent authors who aren't published, they're self publishing, and they're looking for narrators who need practice. And so they do what's called a royalty share. And there's a lot of growth that can happen there, a lot of ways to get practice. There are websites like Learning Ally, where you are recording for the blind and you are donating your time. It's a
Hmm.
great way to practice. Um, so there are sites like Find a Way where you can hook up with independent artists and authors. And then um, again, all the things I'm sure other people have come on to talk about is networking, going onto LinkedIn, finding out who the big players are, who produces these things, who are they connected to? Am I connected to anyone they're connected to? Comment, share, um, and question on, you know, audiobook Facebook pages and LinkedIn pages and social media and build awareness. So I mean, it's such a tough question to ask because I could speak for hours on how to break into the industry, but I don't think there's any one way.
Right.
You know, I don't believe that there's one path for any of us, right? We all have to kind of go our own way. So, um I think if someone is interested in audiobooks, I'm
Hmm.
sure they know someone who's already doing it or they know of someone, and
Yeah.
to just start asking questions, reach out, start asking questions.
Nice. Yeah, I think that, part of the goal of this podcast is to get everyone's different story because everyone is
Yeah,
different.
for
We've had
sure.
no two people who are alike. So, do you want to dry read the commercial script?
Yeah, I don't have it. Where is it?
Oh, I emailed it to you.
Did you really?
I did.
I think you're lying.
I emailed it about an hour ago.
Oh, that's different. Um, did you? All I have is yes, me too from an hour ago. Would you help this poor
Yeah,
technologically sh- challenged woman and would you send it again or throw it up in the chat?
sure, no problem. So let's see. Um, I just have to think about where I put it.
I don't know.
Drive.
Well,
That's
if it
okay.
fabulous. I saw in your prep that you sent me, do
Yeah.
you sit or do you stand? And I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Um, I this year I made a commitment to myself to stand for every audiobook that I record.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, but I love it. But I mean I have the ability in my booth to sit or stand, which is I think if you're going to do long form anything, you need to have that ability. So I'm really proud of myself that I'm doing that. That's why it's like, hey, you
That's
didn't ask that
amazing.
question yet. Yeah. Oh,
That is an
it is.
amazing thing to do an audiobook while standing.
Well, I am so much more grounded in my characters, in my narration. By standing, I have so much more breath control. I'm like, why didn't I pay attention to this sooner?
Hmm.
But I didn't. So that's my sit stand story.
Well, I sit to do the podcasts and I
Yeah.
stand to do my work. So,
Okay.
all right. So I put it in the chat. You should see it now.
All right. Uh, okay. So that's my lack of prep right there. Do you see that? Just
Yeah.
a scan. You know, you're putting me on the spot with like commercial stuff when all I do is audiobooks. I
Well,
think
you
that
can
I
read it
should
like
get,
an audiobook.
well, if you'd been, but that's not how it goes, right? Like I have to, the author's intention, it's got to be what was meant to be there. All right.
Uh-huh.
Oh, but I'm so nervous.
Oh, don't be. Just share with us your mindset and what you think about, and you can talk out loud about how you're thinking about it, and then
I'm
just do
thinking,
it.
you want to know what I'm really thinking?
Yeah.
I'm really thinking I'm going to stumble over these words and make a fool out of myself. That's what I'm really thinking.
That is excellent preparation. That's the
Because
secret to a good read.
I think everybody's afraid that they're going to make a mistake. So,
Um,
but in audiobooks, like mistakes are, that's like part of the deal. I mean, you're going to read 400 pages. You're definitely going to make at least 400 mistakes. It's
right.
just like goes without saying. But commercial copy is so short, there's pressure not to make any mistakes. All right. I'll give it a shot.
All right.
So, so this is small and I'm blind and I'm just going to do my best here.
All
All right.
right.
Can I get like, all right.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. There are no stakes here. There's no
No stakes.
stakes.
No stakes. Okay, cool. Ready? Lyft is a lot more than just a car ride. Ah, yeah, you heard me right. Shared rides, bikes, scooters, fancy cars, public transit, and more. And they're all available with your Lyft app. We're always happy to pick you up. But when we can help you get there more, but we can help you get there more ways than you thought. Download the Lyft app today and get going.
That sounded great.
All right then.
So all this storm and thunder, and then it sounded great.
Except I did mess up on the line.
That's okay. Thank you. So what were you thinking?
Yeah.
What were you thinking when you were prepping for that?
Um, you know, the yeah, you heard me right line.
Yeah.
It can be interpreted many ways, right? Like there can be a rough edge to it, like, yeah, you heard me, or like a friendly, like, yeah, you got it. Or for me, like that wry wink and a smile, like, oh, yeah, you heard me. It's cool. You gonna like it, you know? So I kind of took that, you know, buddy
Uh-huh.
attitude toward it. Sure.
Sounds good. All right. How about auditioning for audiobooks? What suggestions do you have for people just getting into that?
Um, I think auditioning for audiobooks comes easier to me, right? So I always look up the author, I look up past works that they have done. I look into the genre. Is this literary fiction? Is this sci-fi? Is this fantasy? I try to understand the character, right? My who am I? So
Hmm.
I always ask myself those four questions that I talked about: who am I, where am I, how am I feeling, and what am I doing? To help inform what I'm reading. And then, just like I had said, I try to tap into the author's intention. I try to hear it the way they wrote it. And then I just go with my instincts. The rest is not my job, right? The rest
Hmm.
is up to the people deciding. But as long as I feel like I've gone in and I've done my part, um, then I walk away satisfied.
And how long is an audition usually? Is it 5 minutes, 15 minutes,
Um,
1 million minutes?
Yeah, it usually depends. It's interesting in audiobooks because some producers will just call and say, "Hey, I have a book for you." And then other projects they'll say, "We need an audition for this." So it all depends. But the I want to say they're usually between 3 and 6 minutes.
Hmm.
Yeah, between 3 and 6 minutes.
Okay. And are there any sort of like quirks about auditioning or starting or doing audiobooks that people might not know about?
Are there any?
Are there any like unique things to audiobook auditions and that the beginning process that people who aren't doing them might not know about?
I would say listen to audiobooks.
Mm,
Be a listener of audiobooks, um, and get coaching before you just break out and start doing the thing.
mhm.
Because I think there's a lot to that question.
Yeah,
There's a lot that goes into it. I don't know if there are tips or tricks, right?
yeah.
Because every piece is going to be different. And I think what I usually ask people to do is pick up on and look at character in a script, subtext. Look at, really reading the subtext of something as opposed to just the words in front of you,
Mhm,
avoiding getting too rhythmic, right? So if I've got this in front of me, a lot of audiobook readers might do Lyft is a lot more than a car ride. Yeah, you heard me right. Shared rides, bikes, scooters, fancy cars. They get into a rhythm
mhm,
when people start reading audiobooks. And I think that's where commercial VOs can really shine in audiobooks because you already are in the habit of not doing that.
mhm,
But in long form narration, getting into a rhythm, and I am guilty of it myself, we all get stuck in it from time to time, is something to practice getting out of and really looking at the text and what's happening around you. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How am I feeling? And tapping into all of that.
mm, nice. You made audiobooks sound a lot more interesting to me.
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
I'm so glad.
I feel like I should audition for one or two now.
Well, I don't see a reason not to. I mean, the industry is booming, booming right now.
Uh-huh. And do you usually have to let's talk about breathing for a minute.
Mhm.
How do you deal with, breathing or do you not breathe while you're, reading?
So it's really interesting because that gets it gets no, it gets talked about a lot, breathing. Um, and there's so much to say about it. I feel like every question I'm like, "God, there's so many ways to answer this."
Yeah.
When you're and I'm always relating it back to commercial copy because I feel like a lot of your listeners, have a lot more experience with that. So sometimes a lot of people in commercial copy will find a place to breathe
Yeah.
and they'll mark it. In audiobooks, God, that would take a really long time to mark out all the places you're going to breathe over the course of 400, 500 pages. Plus, you would have to read it all out loud to figure out where you needed that breath. So, there are several things that I do. One is if I am staying natural and conversational, I'm going to breathe when I need to breathe. And that's just that. If I'm finding that I'm running out of air,
Mhm.
more often than just a very long, poorly written sentence,
Mhm.
um, then I have to relook at, am I getting into a rhythm? Am I too nervous? Am I not relaxed enough? Why am I losing my breath? Am I nervous? Because these can all contribute to shortness of breath. Um, there's something that I call the punctuation roadmap, which
Mhm.
is, are you paying attention to punctuation? Are you using those commas as a chance to take a breath? Are
Uh-huh.
you using that period as a chance to take a breath? Some people are afraid to breathe. They're just
Mhm.
so nervous. Like, I gotta get the whole sentence out. But in audiobooks, you can have an entire paragraph that is one sentence.
Uh-huh.
So, really paying attention to where the commas are and where those breaks are and making that one sentence more like 10 sentences is a lot easier.
And do you try to breathe quietly or do you just breathe naturally?
I just breathe naturally. I've never, there are some narrators that have a heavy intake of breath. And again, that's, you probably waited too long to breathe.
Mhm.
Right, you weren't but if you are in a natural rhythm of speech, you really shouldn't have to worry about where you're going to breathe. So if you are, chances are one of those things, you're getting nervous, the sentence is really long and you need to, go figure out where you're gonna
Mhm.
breathe in that, or you're not paying attention to punctuation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or, I mean, there's amazing, voice coaches out there that can help you with breathing technique, but I just breathe natural.
Mm.
Yeah.
And oh, I had a question and it just
Thought bug.
breathed out of my
That's
head.
that's
So
alright. It'll come back.
oh, correction. So you're going along, do you just correct things and punch and roll? Or do you do the whole thing and then go and listen back, or some combination of both? Or
So, I encourage people to learn how to punch and roll. Um, so when you make a mistake, I'm rolling along. Lyft is a lot more than just a car ride. Oh, but yeah, oops, that wasn't supposed to be there. And then going back to the top of that and starting again is punch and roll. Um, and then what happens is I'll do that for the entirety of the book, right? So I'll punch and roll um, the whole book, and then I send it off to post production. And post production takes care of things like taking out any weird breaths that maybe I forgot about. They listen to the entire product and read along to see if I missed any mistakes that I made. Are there any weird noises in the background that I didn't pick up on? And they'll send me a QC packet. And that
Mhm.
QC packet will be all of the actual audio clips of the mistake that I made, and also an Excel sheet of what the mistake was, what the mistake should be, and then the script itself highlighted where my mistakes were. And then
Wow,
I go
that sounds
back
like
and
a
redo
job
that.
I don't want to do.
God, no, I would never want to do their job, but they love it. They
Yeah.
all love it. Yeah. So I credit those post-production guys with making me sound better than I do
Well,
because
okay.
they're amazing. Yeah.
Nice.
Or guys and girls. I shouldn't say guys, but
Well, guys is
I meant,
sort of non-gendered.
yeah, I meant everybody.
Yeah, y'all,
Y'all.
all y'all.
Yeah.
So then generally speaking, I guess on ACX you don't really have an editor, but at
You would
places like
hire one.
Audible. Oh yeah?
Yeah, you would hire one. So when I do books like independent books, I have a post production team that I use. And then I become the producer, right? So I am negotiating the agreement with the author about
Uh-huh.
rate and schedule. And then I am hiring a post production team to QC, edit, and master all of those files. And then I am in charge of delivering on time. So then that's how I become the producer of that project.
I see. And that just reflects in the per finished hour amount generally?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So that fits right in.
What does a post-production team cost
They can be, I mean,
per finished
they're
hour?
yeah, per finished hour. They are their own field. But I have seen rates anywhere from $50 to $150 per finished hour.
Okay.
But you get what you pay for. So, and then
Eh,
it's making sure that you're getting everything you need within that budget.
Right.
How many, because a lot of times an author will say, listen, after you guys do your QC, I want to do my own QC. And that's got to be negotiated. So is my
Mhm.
post production team willing to do a second round of pickups that they might have missed?
Mhm.
Or do they want extra for that? That has to be negotiated with them. How do I negotiate that with the author? Do I allow them a second set of QC, or do I not want to do that? That has to
Right.
be a decision. Those are all things that need to be decided ahead of time. When you're working with the publishers, that's that's not your decision. All I have to do is show up and do my job, which is a punch and roll, and I send them files and then they
Mhm.
take care of the rest.
And how does one get in with a publisher?
Um, there's a multitude of ways. There is an organization called the APA, the Audio Publishers Association. And I tell students all the time, you need to be a member of the APA. So all the publishers, all the producers, they're all members. And they have different webinars, they have conventions. Um, and it's a great way to start meeting everybody.
Mm.
Same thing that you would do in the voiceover industry. You would,
Mhm.
check out and stalk people on social media, go to
Mhm.
LinkedIn, put in your the different publishers. Let's use Penguin Random House, for example. Who works at Penguin Random House? Who does the casting? Who's the audio producer? Connecting with those people, connecting with people they're connected to, and start building those connections, start building brand awareness for yourself. And of course, you're going to need things like a website and samples.
Mhm.
So it's no different than how you would find work in the VO world. It's just the people that you are direct marketing to are going to be different.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think of this, I always think of audiobooks as this whole mysterious new world that's
No,
everything is different and
no,
you know, but no.
it's not. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. I get to play, again, I get to play like a little boy and a little girl all the way up to their grandparents and goblins and ghouls and vampires. And I mean,
That
I get
sounds
to
fun.
play,
That does sound fun.
It is.
What do you use to keep your audio up to a certain standard? Do you have presets and everything like that, or that you
You
get,
mean as
I
from
guess?
the engineering side of things?
Yeah, so like I guess ACX has certain standards that they use, and you have
Mhm.
to know how to set that up on your DAW.
Mhm.
I'm
So
assuming that
I don't know how to
Audible.
do any of that,
Uh-huh.
right? So I am one of those, I guess, old schoolers where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to pay people who do that for a living to do that, and I'm going to do what I do. So early on, when I set up my system, I have a background in production, so I knew a little bit.
Yeah.
And so basically I will look at the specs and make sure, I do as much as I can on my own with my limited knowledge.
Yeah.
And then I'm a big fan of ask a professional.
Mhm.
So
I've played
I,
that game.
yeah, so my setup hasn't changed. And there's kind of an industry standard. I don't think it's any different than VO. I've recorded several VOs from this booth. With no problem. So, um, but early on, I hired someone and said, "Hey, take a listen to these files. What do I do? Help me out." Yeah, I'm all for don't struggle and try to figure it out yourself when there are professional people out there willing to help.
That's really good advice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Um, and that's kinda all we got. You wanna
awesome.
self-promote a little bit?
Mm. Um, sure. If you let's see, you can find me at my website, vamaudio.com. I'm on the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams.
And it's
Um,
Khristine with a Khristine,
that's
right?
right. I jokingly say my parents just didn't know how to spell.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can find me there. Again, if you're an independent author, I produce and direct. If you're interested in getting into audiobooks and you want to learn more, I also coach. Um, as a coach, I do things a little differently. I say to everyone, I always want to be the coach I didn't have.
Uh-huh.
So, as far as coaching, I like to take a personal interest in somebody. So, I only take 9 students a year, and we really dive into what they want to do, what they want to get out of this career, and I do my best to help them get it.
And do you have, like, a big fight to the death over who gets to be the 9 students?
No.
Oh,
No, I don't do a lot of advertising about coaching. It's not the main thing that I do. So it's usually word of mouth, or if I have the privilege of talking to someone like you and someone hears about what I do, I might get an inquiry, but I don't take any more than 3 people in a 3-month span. And so the
nice.
program lasts about 3 months, and we kind of go from start to finish. Like, what do I need to do to start, and how do I need to, where does this need to end, and how can I start getting some work? So
Mm,
I feel like I have done my job as a coach if my students are working when we're done.
nice. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Any final words?
No, just thank you, Ian, for having this platform for me to speak and to chat with people who might not know how wonderful the audiobook industry can be. And I'm really grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
It's been
It's
a
been lovely
pleasure.
talking to you.
Right back at you, sir.
You've been listening to Voiceover. How did you do it? At www.voiceoverpodcast.com with me, Ian Kleinfeld. You can watch the video to all our podcasts at voiceoverpodcast.com/YouTube. The background track is 1959 by my alter ego Max Rocket, and you can find that and other songs at www.maxrocketmusic.com. Remember to like, subscribe, write a review, and all that good stuff on whatever podcast streaming service you're listening to, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.